r/AskReddit. What's the worst punishment you ever received as a child? I grew up with my grandma and I can't exactly remember what I did, but next thing I know she's laying a pile of uncooked rice in the corner to kneel on for 10 minutes. It felt like I was kneeling in a gravel driveway with charred rocks. Forgot about the time she threw me outside in the snow and my boxers and locked the door. I was 8. Definitely the buck rag. I still feel sick thinking about it. For those who don't know, a buck rag is a rag that's been rubbed all over a male goat in rut. It's used for some goat breeding purposes. Lady goats love the smell. In our town, some parents would buy these rags from goat farmers to punish children for misbehaving. You take the child out back, pull the rag out of the jar, drape it over the child's face, and tie a knot in the back. It's not dangerous, but it makes them smell the horrible goat odor. I never saw what the big deal was until I was buck ragged as a 16-year-old girl for cursing out my parents. I puked a lot. 7 years old, I wouldn't move my hands from my butt, so my mom dragged me to the bathroom. While there she lifted me up by my legs and attempted to give me a swirly. My hands immediately latched onto the toilet bowl to stop my head from falling in. Then my mom freed up one of her hands to turn my ass red. After a few hits my arms gave out and my head dropped hard into the toilet water. After that she yelled at me for 5 more minutes and ordered me to take a shower. She still denies doing this or any of the other corporal punishment my sister and I were subjected to. Probably getting strangled by my dad after I stormed away from the dinner table while yelling that I hated eating with my parents because all they did was yell and curse at one another. My dad once told me that if I let the word shit cross my lips again, I'd truly have shit cross my lips. I didn't listen and said it again that night. And he took a piece of fresh dog poop and made me hold it on my tongue for 30 seconds. I cried and never cursed again until I was 21. I got the wooden spoon a lot, and once my mom was so angry, not particularly at me, just in general, which is more messed up, that she threw a porcelain teapot at the back of my head while I was going down the stairs. But the scariest beating I saw happened to my best friend in high school. We were supposed to be having a sleepover at her house, but instead we went out and partied till 3 AM. When we got to her house, her dad was up. I'm pretty sure he was drunk. And he was pissed. He beat her with a field hockey stick for what seemed like forever. She was in bad shape. Suffice to say, I never slept over there again. Edit. For everyone asking if I called the cops or reported her dad, 2 things. I was 15 YO and never experienced anything like that in my life. I was definitely in shock and scared for my life as this was unfolding. Obviously that's not an excuse. I later mentioned to her that I was thinking about telling someone, but she begged me not to as her mom was not in the picture and she was the only one taking care of her younger brother and did not want to be separated from him. She moved out with her brother as soon as we graduated high school. Either the cigarette burns to my scalp or the days without food because I misbehaved. My parents were, and still are, meth addicts. Duck them. My stepbrother punched me in the face and gave me a bloody lip. My stepmother decided as a punishment she would hit us both with a belt. I don't know why I was in trouble for getting punched, but she held onto the end of the belt with the holes and swung the belt buckle at us. It hit the back of my right hand and I still feel the pain in the back of my hand when I squeeze something with it. I got punished for getting punched in the face. I still don't understand what I did wrong 23 years later. Hands tied behind my back with a belt so I couldn't cover myself, and then beat about the face, neck and shoulders with another belt for several minutes. Dad was a real piece of shit. Edit. Thanks for the kind words. Life got better. Red heart. I was driven about 30 minutes outside of my city to an isolated, large, and creepy looking building, which I was told was an orphanage. I was given the choice of telling the truth and admitting to something I had not done or being left there. I am 38 and still think about this from time to time. Update. Not to excuse what they did, but my mum and dad both had terrible upbringings with abusive parents. My dad was full of anger and my mum was rather weak and full of shame. I started therapy about 5 years ago and was reaching a point where I was going to decide whether to confront my parents with how I felt about my childhood, or cut them from my life. Then my dad died. With his death, a lot of my own anger about how they'd behaved went. I've been able to be the bigger person with my mum and set her a better example of how to behave, including how I expect her to behave towards me. Our relationship is stronger than it has ever been, and I don't dwell on this event in the same way. I used to be hurt thinking about it. Now I see it as the reactions of angry and scared people to a situation they couldn't control, and resolve to do better myself. The pointless ones. We had landscaping rocks in our yard from an unfinished project. They were probably £30 each. After a number of other punishments failed, my parents came up with a move rocks punishment. I'd have to move 30 or so of these rocks 50 yards, set them up into a particular shape, square, circle, etc. Have my parents check them and then move them all back. The pointlessness of it all was the worst. My parents homeschooled me in my last year of school because I had a boyfriend, lost my seat and scholarship to the college I had early exception for since the 11th grade, and then took my resp for themselves to go on a cruise when I went with a different program because I didn't have the marks for the original program. An ass whooping from dad, that his grip and my trying to run, broke my arm. Just predicting this thread gonna have a lot of straight up torture in it. I told my brother to duck off and die. I turned around to a 2x4 to the chest, then spent 8 hours total picking up tiny ass rocks out of the yard and putting them in a bucket. When the bucket was full, my dad would walk around the yard throwing them around. Then I'd pick them back up again. Edit. For those asking, a 2x4 is a piece of wood used in construction. If you were to open up the walls of your house, many of you would find 2x4 cut into 8 or 9 feet lengths used to frame your house apartment dwelling. My uncle would have me stand T-pose and hold books. Not too bad. Then I have to stand on my toes, then he would put nails sticking up under my heels. He would dare me to relax. Edit. On a related to my uncle note, he also chased me and my cousin, his own child, with a BB gun and shot at us. He eventually hit my cousin in the eye. The BB got stuck on his eyelid, so thankfully, there was very minimal damage to his eyeball. I was in kindergarten and I had peed myself because I was having too much fun watching a movie in class. The teacher put me in the bathroom with the lights out and door closed for the rest of the movie, 45 minutes or so, and it was storming really badly outside. I'm still afraid of the dark and loud noises. My sister cheated on a paper, so all 4 of us lost computer privileges for a month. Collective punishment just isn't effective or fair. When I was around 6 years old, my stepdad woke me up in the night by pulling me out of the bed and yelling that I had got piss on the toilet seat. He took me out on the front porch, and while he was paddling me, the rail I was bracing against broke and I fell off the porch. So my dad found an old wooden hockey stick that was thrown away. He saw it and thought it'd make a great weapon to beat us with. He called it Mr. Sticko and he broke over my back for something I did. That one really sucked. Edit. Hey guys. Thank you so much for the well wishes and cake day shoutouts. They mean a lot. So my dad and I are actually kind of good. We obviously don't have a great relationship, but growing up in a community where my friends had it just as bad, it never seemed weird until I left. I got much needed therapy and anger management to learn how to solve my issues without violence. Thank you again. My mother cancelled my birthday one year. I was being a mouthy little shit and didn't believe she would follow through once she presented it as a potential consequence for my behavior. Turns out my mother doesn't make empty threats. No gifts received, and I had sit there while she called my friend's parents to say the party was off. I think the other mothers were mortified, but I got the gift she sent back a month later for Christmas and I learned a few lessons. When I was 8 years old, I had every dish in the house thrown at me, including a loaf of bread. I was then locked outside till midnight. I was first put out in the morning. Got put on restriction for 6 months for doing something my mom said I could do, but then she said she never gave me permission to do, even though another adult was sitting there and confirmed he heard her give me permission to do it. Also had to pick up all the rocks in the vacant lot next to our house and put them in a pile on weekends as part of the punishment. I shit my pants in the 4th grade. I don't know why, but I had a condition that made me hold it all in and not use a toilet. This had been going on and off my entire life. Not a problem anymore. My dad was furious. I remember being naked in my bedroom with my dad. My dirty underwear was on the floor and my dad had a hard grip on my arm while he screamed and yelled at me. He yelled at me things like, "How old are you? No one is gonna wanna be your friend and you're disgusting." He then beat me his belt. My dad worked at a flour mill and spent his days stacking 100-pound flour bags 10 high, so he was built like the ducking Hulk. He would then rub my shit-filled underwear in my face, making me look at it and smell it. In the 1980s, my father was a radioman and often had spare parts lying around. Whenever I was rebellious toward him, he was fond of whipping my bare back with metal radio antenna. I was the youngest of 3 girls in my family. My worst punishment came after my dad left. As a baby, my dad would beat my sisters for any little thing they did wrong, but because I was born on his birthday, he saw me as special. My father was a drug addict who brought fear into the home, and only I wasn't touched by his fists and feet. My sisters and mom were all victims, and while they tended their wounds, I was smothered and loved. They hated me for it. Dad left and now no one was protecting me. What was my worst punishment? I was locked up. My mom would lock me in my room for hours and my sisters had free reign on me with their punishments. Every time I stepped out of line, I was reminded how much hate there was. I was beat by my sisters and neglected by my mother. My worst punishment was when I said to my mom that I hated her and the family and I wished they were all dead. But she grabbed me by the hair, dragged me into the laundry and locked me in there. The floor was stone and it was winter. I remember being so cold it hurt. I guess I was asleep when I was eventually let out. I hated my punishments. The locking up stopped when I was around 12. My mom grabbed me by both shoulders and shook me until I went through a wall. But I thought I was never going to breathe again when she put both knees on my chest and yelled at me while holding me down and shaking my shoulders. Edit. To clarify, the second sentence was a separate incident. Some questions answered. This kind of incident didn't happen often, but those 2 times were when I was between 8 and 10. I have recently found out that she has some type of schizophrenia that has morphed into dementia with her around 6-month apex. She is ancient now and I am her primary caregiver because she is my mother and she wiped my butt as a baby. She has her moments, but I just tell her that she is going to hurt her wrist if she keeps hitting me. Other than twice a year, she is great. Reading some of the other stories, I really didn't have it that bad. I feel for you all. Thank you for the hugs. Some guy my mom brought home that she was dating got really drunk and took me in the bathroom and beat me with a belt. He said it would be 20 licks, but he was so drunk he kept losing count. I tried crawling behind the toilet for protection but couldn't fit. That just made him more angry. I tried not to cry because I learned they enjoyed that, but I couldn't help it. I don't remember anything after that. Not sure if that's the worst, but that one came to mind. Made to drink distilled vinegar. It was probably from ages 5-10 that my parents used it as punishment. They would rotate between spanking, whipping our asses with the leather swatches or the branches of our beloved willow tree, putting us in corners for extended periods of time. If we cried or complained, 20 minutes doubled to 40 and so on. Old-fashioned soap and the god-forbidden vinegar. I still have major teeth and jaw problems at 22, and my stomach esophagus has never felt normal. My dad holding me up by grabbing my ear and my foot. Most of these aren't punishments. This stuff is child abuse. My mom said I couldn't have a best friend anymore because my best friend and I were drawing pentagrams on Ms. Paint at our after-school program, pretending they were transmutation circles from an anime called Fullmetal Alchemist. Pentagrams are much easier for a 9-year-old to draw than an intricate alchemy array. My mom immediately jumped to this being devil worshipping, despite my friend and I not even knowing what a pentagram really meant. This led to my mom telling every single teacher and after-school care worker not to allow me to be anywhere near my friend. Friend moves away and mom won't let me email her to stay in touch. I'm 24 now and haven't had any close friends since. Christina, if you're out there, I still miss you. At Catholic school with nuns as teachers, those beaches were doing the devil's work. I remember being forced to kneel on hardwood floors on popcorn kernels while saying the rosary. Duck you, Sister Mary Joan, you evil witch. Honestly, I could withstand almost any punishment, physical or otherwise, pretty well even as a child. It just never bothered me. The worst punishment I received was having my phone car and laptop taken away for a crime I didn't commit. Basically, my parents found a fifth of expensive Scotch whiskey missing from the liquor cabinet and blamed me until about a week later when one of our family friends called thanking them for the gift. They had somehow both completely forgotten all about it. Getting in trouble when I was innocent was what really got to me. My mom pulled down my pants and hit me with the brush side of a hairbrush in front of my 3 fellow 5-year-old friends. I was innocent. She didn't believe me. I had poison ivy put all over my back. So guess how I turned out? LOL tip. Lightly rub some sandy dirt on it. Had friends whose parents forced them over fire with hot spices thrown in it. Gladly, the general consensus is that this is an outdated and terrible cultural practice in punishing anyone. So less of it is happening nowadays. Edit. Imagine hot spices. Now imagine breathing the smoke that comes from burning those spices. It's used to be a torture technique in East Africa. You don't want to have a person in that kind of smoke for more than a few seconds because they'll die before giving you the intel you need. Edit 2. I got my first award. Thank you so much. I'm gonna show it to my parents and prove that I'm worth something. My sister and I were constantly watching Star Wars and quoting Star Wars and playing with Star Wars toys. It drove my parents to ban all Star Wars related things in the house for 3 months. Had my door taken off the hinges, and all of my belongings, some bed and dresser, taken out of my room. Some got sold, some tossed, some given to my younger sibling. This punishment lasted a full 4 months, just because I dropped from a B to a C in one class in high school. So glad I finally cut them out of my life. My dad used to tell us he'd sell us to the gypsies if we didn't behave. Once you get a bit older you realize he's bluffing. At least I hope he was. This led to one hilarious incident when my dad shouted at my 7-year-old brother that he was gonna get the gypsies and make them come get him. He picked up the phone and started dialing a number. My 7-year-old brother smiled, knowing full well he wasn't really, but my 4-year-old brother burst into tears and ran to my dad screaming, No, don't sell Benny to the yippies chippies. Please, don't do it. Bawling his eyes out. Total backfire. Edit. Oh, it wasn't yippies, it was chippies, my youngest brother called them. In the UK, that's a slang word for a fish and chip shop, a takeaway place. My grandparents beating my mother in front of me for me talking to her. I was in their custody and my mother was an addict who they didn't want around and she kept trying to call and come see me. So she came over and my grandparents beat her, broke her jaw and nose, and said it was my fault for talking to her. I was 7. My mum took everything in my room except a blanket, my radio, books, toys, you name it. I was locked in there for the UK summer holidays. They are 6 weeks long. My mum used to beat 10 bells of shit out of, but being locked in that room the whole summer was probably the worst. Duck, this thread is dark. Not me, but one of my siblings. We were quite young and they didn't want to finish all the food on their plate. So my stepdad duct taped them to the dining room chair and wouldn't let them out until they finished. Slapped across the face as a 12-year-old girl by my father when I burned nachos in the microwave. This was the first time he slapped me, so I remember it well. He used to spank me, but switched to open-handed slaps to the face when I got too old for spanking. My dad had a belt he kept on a nail in the kitchen. If you got in trouble you'd get hit with a number of times, never seemed to be the same, on your butt. That hurt. Father of 3, never used physical discipline on any of my kids. Bamboo feather duster to the butt, it's basically caning. Grounded from Halloween after a couple weeks of neglecting chores and being caught playing video games under the covers on a school night. Our whole neighborhood had a block party and I could hear all the trick-or-treating from my room. Didn't even score the reject candy after my sisters came home, either. Beatings will continue until your morale improves. In all ducking serious, life got better and I never see my dad anymore, and him and my mom ask when I'm having kids and why I haven't seen them in years despite living probably 30 minutes from them. When I was 14 during an entrance interview to high school I didn't want to go to with the headmistress and my dad by my side. I told the honest truth to the headmistress. I didn't want to go there, though it was a lovely school. I just wasn't up for it as politely as I could. It's not like it was a secret. She could pretty much see the misery on my face. I had valid reasons that I gave to my parents several times before, but my dad is hella strict, so still made me apply to that school. We got home and my dad was furious. He took my phone and the door to my room. I went to bed early and in the middle of the night, he came to my room, told me to get up and draw the curtains. I only had underwear and a t-shirt on. As I got up, he used a long Wicco, basically wooden cooking stick of around 16 inches to whack the shit out of me. I screamed in pain, but this guy didn't care. He hit me everywhere. Bruises and scars like I had never seen until the stick broke and he took off his slipper and continued to hit me for like 10-15 minutes, saying how he felt disrespected and who I thought I was acting like that. I never saw him the same way again. I still shudder a little when I hear his voice and when he touches me, even for a hug, and I'm 19. I ended up going to a different school, meeting my parents halfway. Not perfect, but definitely much better. My mom found out my sister was suicidal, so she locked my sister in her room with literally nothing but a blanket and maybe an air mattress. She was only let out to use the restroom. Food and clothes were brought up to her and then taken when she was finished. My mom told me about this when I was about 8 or 9. I am 19 now and I have never and will never tell her about any of my mental health issues for fear of my life. My mom put me on dog restrictions when I was 8 or so years old. I wasn't allowed to pet, look at, or interact with either of our dogs for 48 hours. I was so upset. I loved my dogs so much. It hurt my feelings so much when they walked over to me and I had to ignore them. Also, getting switched was pretty awful. For those that don't know, a switch is a long thin branch from a willow tree used to spank a child. Talk about leaving some welts on your ass. Woo-wee, that shit hurt. I can still hear the whistling sound it made as the switch was slicing through the air. My worst punishment was when I was 13. I went out with my friend who I've known for years. We went just around my neighborhood and parked nearby for hours. My mom was absolutely pissed about it. I was grounded for 6 months, with no electronic usage. I wasn't allowed to see any of my friends. I was a little hostage in my own house. I've never felt so alone and disappointed in myself, and I felt awful for my friend who had to go through that with me. In grade 10, in my part of the world, grade 10 was the first year of high school. I got an 80% on my Christmas French exam and, as punishment, I wasn't allowed out of the house on school nights for the rest of high school. It proved how many people shouldn't be parents or near other humans really. I thought my parents are trash, but after reading some comments here, I think I should just stay quiet. My parents would cancel holidays and birthdays. Yep, they cancelled Christmas once. Not as horrible as some of the other comments on here, but one time I told my mom to shut up when I was about 5 or so, and she slapped me on the mouth, causing one of my little baby teeth, which was wiggly, to pop out. Can't tell if I was more grateful to get the little shit out of my mouth or shocked that she slapped me. When I had to choose it, I had a bad progress report in middle school, so I forged my mom's signature on it. Got caught. Honestly, the writing was so shaky and my writing is terrible at the jump. Don't know how I thought that was a good shot. When the school called my parents, they said they'd talk to me when I got home. They said I had to decide what my punishment was. Obvious trap. Too hard on yourself and that sucks. Too lenient and they come down hard. That choice was worse than the actual punishment. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.